delicious stuff. So while you guys are all finishing up your wines, I guess, well, there we are. We're ready to go. We can go on to the, while we're pouring the rinse. So from Norway, Oregon's a long shot. Of all the places in the world to make wine, why Oregon?
Pinot Noir.
Nice.
I was introduced to Pinot the summer of 2004 when I was in Denver, Colorado, enjoying those wines with a friend there, and I said,
what was the Oregon wine that put you over the top?
Nice.
I'm not going to name one specific wine because it was multiple.
Series.
Yeah, it was a series.
Even in Denver, there was good exposure.
Yeah, it was,
Nice.
and it's some of the more known, bigger producers here now.
Sure.
But in 2004, I'd never tasted an Oregon Pinot before, and I was definitely impressed right off the bat.
What was the vintage then? That sort of were they all sort of in a similar vintage?
Were you drinking 02s
Yeah.
at that point?
02?
They were 01s, 02s, 03s.
Okay,
That's an alright time to be
drinking. Yeah, that's good.
I was really impressed.
That's it.
What was second place? If you hadn't come to Oregon, where would you have gone?
I don't know. I haven't even thought about that.
Wow. So Oregon was that clear? You're just like, that's where I want to be. That's it.
Well, yeah. I mean France, but
sure.
Limited.
If it was all free, right? If it was all
Exactly,
free.
right.
You buy Dominique Conti and set up right there.
Exactly. I didn't have that kind of wallet.
That's pretty cool. Yola-Amity, any specific attachment to this AVA, or is this just a property that you thought was interesting?
Well, it's a little bit different than the Yola-Amity AVA too, and a lot of that has to do with the Van Dusen corridor and the coastal breezes we get in here in the afternoons, which cools everything down. I bet our site is a little bit colder than average, and our growing season is just a little bit longer. Also, soils are different. We're not on jewelry soils. We're on different silt loams, sedimentary soils, and soils that came in with the Missoula flood that Dan can tell you more about.
Nice, and we had a great conversation about this, so we're going to run with this before we get into the first Pinot Noir. The soils right here are unique relative to Yola-Amity, which is literally across the road.
Yeah,
from these guys.
That point.
But let's indulge us. We're here with some experts. This is some great information we can share with you guys.
Good time to talk about it.
What is different about your vineyards relative to the people across the highway?
It's mostly the soils. The number one fact is that we are in the Van Dusen corridor, which is a geographic corridor that's east to west running corridor that funnels in ocean breezes every day in the middle of the summer. It really cools us down. It drops the temperature down to about 2 degrees lower than our surrounding areas. So that's the main thing. It's a climatic influence. And some of the Amityville hills takes advantage of that, if they're on the western slope or more exposed to it. But the other big advantage is our soils. We actually have higher stress soils than Jory or Willamette or any of the other soil profiles that the rest of Oregon talks about.
Vineyard dog.
Yeah, sorry. That was good. Dogs hanging out.
So our soils were brought in by the Missoula floods, and when the floods came through, they stripped our hills off because we're not exactly valley floor. We're on some hills that protrude above the valley floor, and when the flood came through, it stripped the existing soils off before it deposited what the glaciers and the flood brought in. And what the flood and glaciers brought in is what I call a potpourri of soils. It's a mixture of everything that came in from Missoula, Montana, and they say even the source of the flood came actually from Canada. So we get boulders, granite boulders and tons of granite in.
Which you don't see throughout the valley otherwise, right?
Yeah, you don't really see it in Oregon at all. Most of Oregon is basalt based, so you'll see basalt around, and that's part of the influences of Amdiola Hills and the other AVAs to the north of us. But it, basically, when the floods came in, it stripped our hillsides off and then deposited granite boulders and decomposed granite and all these soils from Washington and everything that the flood came through. And actually in our area is one of the highest areas of erratic boulders that came in, and those are mostly granite. So it's just a big mixture of soils with a heavy influence of granite.
And you would call that a young soil, right? Because they've been decomposing for only 17,000 years.
Exactly, exactly.
And unique, right? Like
Yeah,
this isn't in common with any of the AVAs surrounding you guys. So let's move on to the Pinot Noir. You want to tell us a little bit about this before we get into it?
Sure, Dan.
This is our 2008 Willamette Valley Pinot Noir. 1/3 of it is estate fruit, and 2/3 we purchase fruit from other vineyards, which is the first time we've ever done.
Color's massively dark. Massively dark.
Yeah, it's 08. 08 was just an intense year.
Tell us a little bit about 08 actually. What was
2000
your take on 2008?
Well,
how did you enjoy it?
2008 was very stressful. We were running so late. We were behind, further behind than I've ever seen. You know, I came up from California, so that makes me nervous in the first place.
You got all the sun you want, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so it was we were way behind. Yields were really low, extremely low. But then we had this miracle October, and the grapes were just allowed to hang, and at fairly cool temperatures, so the sugars never really spiked. The acids didn't really go away like they normally do in a hot year.
Awesome.
And it just made great wines. I mean, you get fully mature wines, and you know, our alcohols are 12.8, 12.5, right in that range. And it just made.
But really,
It doesn't take away from the flavor.
right, really rich, concentrated flavors
Absolutely.
with that low alcohol, which is
And that's coming
different.
It's coming straight through on the nose. I'm getting like full cherries and blackberries and minerality even on the nose. I was talking to Chaz about this even earlier this week, like how do you describe minerality? To me, that's like wet rocks.
That's my toughest thing, is describing minerality.
When there's an element that's like kind of ephemeral, that, you know, like isn't fruity, it isn't woody, it's not necessarily earthy, but it's, you know, it's like wet rocks. It's like this lighter touch that still provides a degree of structure. Even on the nose, there's minerality that comes through to me, and the fruit flavors are rich without being syrupy. You know, we talk about
Syrup.
a little bit of drink. From
Yeah.
kind of, this is not in that department.
Yeah.
It's full ripe fruit.
This is
it
no
still has
sense.
a light touch.
The other thing I get on
Smells
aromatics
delicious.
too is
Yeah.
you get these darker flavors to it, darker aromas. You get like dark chocolate and a little bit of espresso on it, which I think is what our estate vineyard brought to this wine. And we'll notice that in the Nils in the next wine we taste. It's just has this darkness to it. And vintage through vintage, it always seems to come out.
How important are aromatics to you as you're making wine?
Number one.
Nice! Nice.
That's the reason why we do as much whole cluster fermentation as possible, because it's aromatics. It's aromatics and tannins. Those are like my two keys that I really go on. And so we do a lot of whole cluster fermentation. Whole cluster is basically leaving the grapes on the stems while you ferment them. And the two things that it adds aromatically is baking spice, and then also rose petals, because you get a little bit of carbonic maceration going on.
I would never have guessed that came from stems, which is something I notice in wine from time to time. That's really
Absolutely.
cool.
You get some baby powder almost kind of notes
Yeah,
off of
chocolate
it
powder,
too.
baking powder,
And then those tannin structure gets, you know, you can get those really fine, dusty tannins.
Which is close to
Which
chocolate.
is sort of
Right.
fabulous. I mean, that's,
Sure.
it's still pretty tannic though for an 08. Like I've had like you guys' base releases I've had from other producers are like pretty forward and fruity. Like this is still very fruity, but with a good amount of structure, like a balanced structure to the fruit, which is really, really nice.
And
Yeah, the acidity runs out.
the acidity runs out across the palate.
Yeah, good.
It falls off the side along with some really like bright but still full cherry flavors. And this isn't like just a hint of cherry. This is like the cherry all the way through. You take the full bite, you chew it around in your mouth. The cherry flavors wash over the entire mouth. and the acidity keeps it clean.
This is in a way that will age too, I think. I mean, this is
Yeah.
structured really nicely, well put together. It's delicious, absolutely delicious.
What do you like best about this wine? Put you on the spot.
I mean, yeah, I mean, a lot of things we just talked about. I mean, obviously, we're big fans of structured wines. I mean, I don't like anything flappy and, you know, something that'll be all over the place in my mouth. I'd like to be kind of like a focused fruit, which you get with good tannin structure and good acidity.
Absolutely.
And this has those characteristics.
Yeah, and I'm just really impressed consistently, and I've been a fan of what these guys produce for a while, and I think they really deliver, you know, good flavors along with good structure that doesn't dominate. Some of you watching even right now, I know you love the big heavy wines, you like even structure dominated wines. That's not so much my style, you know, but power to you, if that's what you like, that's what you like. These guys, I think, provide a really excellent integration. I would contend acid-driven structure, the tannins are there, they play well, but the acidity keeps things fresh, keeps things clean, dries really well while accentuating, you know, the flavors of, you know, of the bright fruit and keeping, you know, everything's full on the palate, which I really like.
Kills. It's good.
Good stuff, good stuff.
It
Cool.
stabs, I would say.
You're ready
Oh,
Really
wow, yeah,
Stabs.
okay, all right, yeah.
Ready for the reserve?
Really,
Ready for
really
the
good.
reserve.
Very good.
So tell us the story here,
100% estate fruit.
okay?
Sat 18 months on French oak.
Rinse?
I'd say about 40% new. 100% native yeast.
Who's Nils?
Also, Nils, my dad.
Alright.
Yeah.
So why'd you name the
He
wine?
makes the stiffest coffee in the world.
Yes!
Well, the story behind the name Johan, which is my middle name, is that, you know, being from Scandinavia, we have these weird family traditions, and we have Nils and Johan as our two alternating names for the firstborn son of the family. So my dad was a Nils, and my grandfather Johan, and you know my grandfather's grandfather Johan, and so forth. So my firstborn son will be a Nils.
Nice.
I know my dad tracked that back here a few years back, and he could track it back to like 1786 or something. That it's been going on, so I better get a son.
A little bit of pressure.
Yeah. For sure. But anyway, that's the story behind
That's
it.
a rinse, I guess you can dump or keep that as you see fit, but, when'd you get into wine? How old were you when you got into wine?
Early 20s, I'd say.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you knew right away you wanted to get involved in the production, or this was just like, wow, this is a lot
No,
more delicious than I
not
thought?
really. I mean, I pretty much made the decision when I was here that summer. You know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Big
it was
leap.
yeah, big leap.
Jump.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm gonna go into business doing something, what's it gonna be?
Yeah, and the plan was I was going to do this with the old business partner of my dad, and we were going to do it together.
Sure.
But anyway, that was just kind of idea we got then and there. Like, okay, this is so good. Wouldn't it be fun to own a business and run a vineyard and make wine?
Nice. And is it fun, now that you're living the life?
It is. It's a lot more work than I anticipated back then, but it's definitely worth it. Yeah.
Talk to two things about people, if people are watching that think about someday in their life owning a vineyard. What's one good thing and one bad thing that you never thought of before you started doing it?
One good
That's a good
thing
question.
is you grow stuff. You know, you get to follow the wine from the beginning, from you prune the vines until finished product, and it's an amazing journey that you're a part of. And you know, it's your own. It's pretty special. I mean, downside is it's expensive and it's a lot of work. You know,
More work than you expected before you got into it?
different. But
All right. Awesome. No, I mean, that's insight that you can't have unless you've been there, so
Right.
that's great to share that. So